I'd like to introduce Talia Rao. She's with Caldwell Banker, McMillan and Associates, and she will start us off.
Good morning, everyone. How are y'all this morning? I think that Lynn had emailed everyone a packet of the buyers.
Sorry. Get it unmuted.
We can't hear.
Okay, can y'all hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Y'all should have received a packet from Lynn, and it'll be a packet of the paperwork that I pretty much go through when I'm sitting down with a brand new buyer. First of all, if you're looking in your packet, you're going to see pre-approval letter. That's the first thing you want when you're going to work with a buyer. Normally I may meet with a buyer for a first time when they're calling about a listing, and I'll show them a house just to kind of meet with them, bond, and kind of get a feel of what they're looking for. But I insist that they speak with a lender. I've asked them, have you talked with a lender? They may not have. And so at that point, I give them a name or so of a couple of lenders that they can speak with. And then I touch base with that lender and say, hey, Miss Jane Doe is going to be calling you. Let me know when you hear from her. Let me know what you think. But before you write an offer, it's just like the one that I've got a copy of here that you're going to be looking at. This is one I did last week. And she probably wanted to write an offer a week before we did. But, I was adamant that I wanted to get a pre-qual, or even better, if you can get a pre-approval letter, that's even better. So that's the first thing you're going to want is a pre-approval letter. It's going to, help you get the process started. And so the next thing you're going to want to do, once you have that in hand and you're preparing your docs, I usually go ahead and get everything prepared before the buyer comes to my office to make that or to sign off on the offer. The next thing you're going to want to go over is South Carolina disclosure of real estate brokerage relationships. Even if you're making an offer on a property that's not your listing, or like in my case, a Caldwell Banker listing. In this case, it was a Aiken & Company listing. By law, you're still supposed to go over brokerage relationships. And so, I go over it with them in a nutshell, describing to them or explaining to them how I can be a dual agent for them and how designated agency also works. And I also tip on transaction agent. Not that we do a lot of that, but from time to time you do meet those buyers. They're adamant they don't want to be signed on with anybody and they want to represent themselves. So I go over those 2 pages, and then I go ahead and have them sign and date it right then. And then I go from there on into the executive or the exclusive right to buy buyer agency contract. And that's where, they've already told me pretty much what they're looking for in a property. So that's when I go ahead and fill all that out. And then I just reiterate and talk to them about it when we're sitting there going over the documents. And, at that time, if they want to change something, say, well, I don't think I want to go up to 290. Let's throttle that back to 275, or let's go ahead and cap it out at 300,000. And then I'll strike through it and I'll make that correction. And when I'm having them to initial the bottom of each page, if I make any changes on any of these pages, I have them initial and date it, because you have to have any changes on a document initial and dated for it to be truly an executed paper or executed document. So I just go through all those, and I try not to leave any blanks. I don't like blanks. I will either do a line through it or I'll put NA, just so we're all in the meeting of the minds that that's not going to apply, or we're not asking for closing costs, or like on page 2, I don't charge a retainer fee or service fee, and I'll have them initial, I'll check off that that one that broker shall obtain payment of the brokerage fee out of the transaction, which is option number 2 under brokerage fee. And I'll have them to, initial there. And I reiterate to them, look, it doesn't cost you anything for representation. You're going to have a agent representing you, running comps, and kind of guiding you along the process. But I'll go through all 4 of the pages and make sure they initial the bottom of each page and sign and date. And I go ahead and usually I'll already have their email, phone number, work number, and I'll go ahead and type all that in and just have them proof that and let me know if I need to make any changes. After you've done that, the next thing I do when I'm filling out paperwork or an offer, I go ahead and get my hands on any seller's disclosures, like the seller's property disclosure, lead-based paint disclosure, lead-based pamphlet. I want everything in a nice, neat little packet, so I have everything at my fingertips when I'm going over this with the buyer. Because you really, really do need to go through all these disclosures before you write the contract. I know we're all happy, want to write that contract. I know it's a seller's market right now, and we're all in a fish frenzy trying to, get a jump on it before, we get into a bid war. But you really there could be something in the seller's property disclosure that the seller's disclosing to that buyer that had they known, they'd have been like, whoa, I wouldn't be offering $275. I would have offered $260 if I'd known that none of the appliances are going to convey, or there's a shared driveway, or there's an encroachment, or, or say the dishwasher don't work and I'm not going to replace it. Well, they're not going to know that unless they look in the seller's property disclosure. So I think in talking to Lynn, I know a lot of times I'll go into Paragon to pull this and it's not there, and that's aggravating. You want what you want when you want it. And then sometimes you can't always get a hold of the listing agent. They could be out showing property. So then you're sitting there waiting. You're going to be meeting with your client in an hour, and that you can't get these documents. And I like to go over that before I even write the offer. So I think now Lynn is going to implement something so that when we put the listing in Paragon, the seller's property disclosure, lead-based paint, anything applicable to that property will be in Paragon. So that's going to make life a lot easier for all of us. But anyway, I go over all 5 pages, looking over it, making sure that they're, looking at it, reading it, make sure they understand it. And then I have them initial the bottom of each page. There's 2 buyers sitting there, my husband and wife, a buyer and his or her significant other. I have them initial the bottom of each page. And then on the last page, I have them, of course, to sign and date. And then if there is restrictive covenants that go along with the property, which a lot of them are, unless they're out in the country and so forth, I'll have them to review that as well and get them to sign and date that. And speaking of which, I go ahead and take it a step further, and I try to get a copy of the restrictive covenants for the particular property. So I'll go ahead. In this case, the house was in Country Club Forest. So many of your offices, they'll have copies of restrictive covenants on file. Like at Coldwell Banker, we have a file of them. We have restrictive covenant books. If you can't find them in the books, we usually go digging in Janice's office. I also have a memory stick with a lot of these on there. So I'll go ahead and print them up. And if I don't have access to them, I'll call one of the closing attorneys. Many of them have them, and I'll get them to email them to me. I go ahead and print off a copy, and if you'll see this. This is just kind of a documentation. We had an attorney write up for one of the companies I worked for years ago, and I've just always used it. Just basically, they're signing and dating that they did receive a copy of the restrictive covenants. Just for example. I wrote an offer, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago now on a property. And I did give her a copy of the restrictive covenants. After she moved in, she proceeds to put up a chain link fence. That's not allowed in that particular neighborhood. It's Clarkdale. Won't allow that. I mean, in their covenants, they have pictures of fences that they will accept, even right down to the pictures of the mailboxes. But she swore them down. She didn't have a copy. And, the neighbors were like, yeah, well, I mean, I had probably at that point sold about 6 houses on that particular street. And they're like, yeah, she would have given you a copy of the restrictive covenants. But anyway, so now I have them sign that they got it. That way, if they try to come up and say they didn't know they couldn't put a chain link fence up, yeah, well, you should have read your restrictive covenants. So once I go through that, you've got all that behind you. They know everything that is possible that you could have got your hands on about the property. They're aware of all that now. You've talked about buyer's agency. You've talked about, you representing them. And of course, at this point, you've had dialogue and discussed things. If they had any, usually when they're signing, I'll say, do you have any questions about anything? And usually they're like, no, they're fine. And now you can go on through and have them sign the offer. And I just go through and I kind of do a synopsis of each thing, as they're going through. And then have them, I usually go ahead and highlight everywhere I want them to initial or date, just make it easy for them. That way they know where they're signing. It makes it easy for me to make sure they've initialed or dated where they need to. And when you make that initial offer, Of course, everything's signed off on. You're gonna, I tend to just negotiate back and forth via phone, and I make notes in the file. Seller countered at X amount of dollars at this date and time. Then I'll go talk to my buyer, and then they counter offer. And you go back and forth 2 or 3 times, and normally at some point the seller is going to say, "Look, this is my bottom line. I can't go any lower than this," or the buyer is going to be capped out. So any changes, like if the seller may want to use a closing date as a bargaining tool, I'll accept your 275, but I want to move that close date up. I don't want to wait 60 days. I'd like to close in 45 days, So any change that takes place on that contract, you can do one or two things. If it's just like in this instance, this one, the only term on the contract was the price. So my buyer had to meet with me the next day anyway to bring me an earnest money check. So I just went ahead and revised page 1, changing that purchase price to the price that we agreed to. And she just had to initial the bottom of this page 1. You could, however, if you wanted to, if you weren't in a position where you could revise page 1, you strike through any change, whether it be price, whether it be the close date. Maybe they negotiated on the terms as far as what they're going to pay in closing costs, but any change needs to be initialed by buyer, or if there's 2 buyers, both of them need to initial, and they need to date that change, as well as the seller needs to initial. So that then everybody's on the same page, and they can't say, "Well, I didn't know that we changed the close date," or "I didn't know they weren't going to pay all my closing costs. I didn't know that I asked for 5 and they're only going to pay for 2,500 of it." You initialed and dated it. You have documentation then. And then when they leave, I give them a copy of everything that we just discussed, and I put it in the envelope for them. That way, if they have any questions later, they get it out. I can pull it out of their file, and we can discuss it. And then once I have a copy of the executed contract with all the changes initialed and dated, and we have an executed contract that everybody's on the same page on, everybody's agreed upon, when I scan and email it to the lender and the attorney, I'll go ahead and copy the buyer on that. That way we've all got a copy of it. And I'm real big on CYA. I make a copy of all my emails, any correspondence I have between me and that buyer, me and the lender, me and the closing attorney. If she comes back and says, "Well, you didn't send me the repair letter, or you didn't send me the home warranty." Yeah, I did. I mean, I'll resend it to them, but that's kind of how I keep myself in check. And I also have a check form that, I check off that, okay, I've given the lender and the attorney their copies. If I know I've already sent it to them, and now let me order home inspection. Let me talk to the buyer and see who they want to do their home inspection. Another thing I typically ask for my buyer, especially if the house is an existing home and the HVAC system has 5+ years on it, I usually go ahead and ask for a home warranty. That's a good comfort blanket for that buyer, and it's going to protect the seller and the listing agent, and you as the buyer's agent, that you got that comfort blanket there. If something happens after closing that the inspector missed, there's a home warranty to fall back on. That's pretty much it. Anybody have any questions about any of this?
I have a question about the home warranty.
Mm-hmm.
I was speaking. I'm an EXP agent, and I'm in mentorship still. And I was speaking with my mentor about things sort of like the home warranty and things like that. And he had mentioned to me about sort of like staying in our lane or whatever, if you will. And he had suggested, I guess, not pushing for things like that. I guess sort of letting the buyer make the decision on that stuff. I guess with
certainly
talk about it.
Right. Certainly you want to ask them. And I explained to them that I just feel like it's, a good negotiating tool. Like when I'm listing a house, I go ahead and talk to the listing, the seller about it. 9 times out of 10, a buyer is going to ask for it. It's not but $675 to cover it for 12 months. I'm just kind of the position, I'd rather have it not need it than need it not have it. Now, some people have not had good experiences with it. Me personally, I've had them on my houses, in the past. The house I'm in now, they've replaced 2 of my HVAC systems. They replaced a Rinnai hot water heater and the ice maker on my refrigerator.
Right.
They can be a stickler about HVAC. So I'll tell you that right now. So I always explain to that buyer, make sure you keep your, and also if the HVAC has some age on it, I go ahead and order an HVAC inspection. You've got that to fall back on. And I tell them, you need to keep it maintained, have it service cleaned and checked at least once a year, so that if you do have problems and the HVAC company's not gonna come back and say, oh no, that's deferred maintenance. That's on you. That way, if you've done your due diligence and you've had them come out and check it, check the coils, and, at least, in the spring for the HVAC, for cooling, and in the fall for, the heating, the buyer will have done their due diligence and done their part. And I think, those kind of inspections, they might be $100 or so, 100, 150, 175, but if you've got that documentation, that's going to save them a lot of heartache, because if they have to go buy a new system, they're looking at a good $5,000. And, I don't know about you, but I don't always just have that sitting to the side. Some of these HVAC companies will make, payment plans with clients. So they could have that to fall back on. But yeah, I think each agent has their own feel as far as, some of them really have heartburn about the HVAC company, and it's really going to fall back on what kind of experience they've had with it. Like with me, like I said, I've always had a good rapport with them, and I like I said, but I have found that they want you to have documentation that you've done your due diligence, that you just didn't say, oh well, I'm not going to worry about the unit, because you know what, I got an HVAC, I got this home warranty, and I just don't have to do my maintenance on it. So it is a good thing to have them come out twice a year and service clean and check the unit. Anything else? Okay, well, Lynn made these copies. I would definitely put them in punch some holes in them, put them in a notebook, good referral, when you're thinking, okay, what now do I need to get together before I meet with my buyer? That way it kind of keeps you organized, and you'll have everything together. And then when you submit your offer to the listing agent, they're just going to love you, because they will have everything and won't be coming back, and you'll have to piecemeal and go back and say, oh, well, I don't have the seller's property disclosure. So now I got to go back to my buyer and have them date it the same date as the contract. So yeah, it's good to go ahead and have everything done when you submit the paperwork. I'm going to turn it over to Ann King now. She's going to talk a little bit about listings, about the documentations that she has her agents do or have them filled out when they meet with their seller or their listing client. So I'm going to turn this over. Hopefully, let's see if I get you here. Sure. Turn that around.
Okay.
Got it.
King is with United Real Estate, South Carolina. Ann is the acting broker there. And again, thank you to Leah. Great job. If you have any questions, please feel free to just use the chat box, or we can unmute you for those questions. Ann, take it away.
Good morning. Welcome to real estate. So you guys didn't have enough stress in your life already, huh? Real estate is really a great business, and I've been in real estate 150 years, so I enjoy it. What I'm going to talk to you about is listings. So what we're going to do, whenever you get a call, I don't know if you guys have on-call time or how you get your listings, but when you get ready to go out to a home to do a listing, you need to be prepared. So I'm sure that you've gone over the listing agreement in class and with your broker already. But what I want to do is just kind of hit some of the highlights, because when you're filling out the listing agreement, you do the, oh, I need to look here. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that, guys. When you're filling out the listing agreement, you need to make sure that the person that's listing the house is the actual owner. And in some cases, you will have an estate sale. And if you have an estate sale, what you need to do, you need to pull the tax records. And if the estate sale is finished with probate and they have a personal representative, and a personal representative is the person that's handling the estate for the family, You need to make sure they have all of their paperwork in place, because you don't want to get down to closing and run into a problem that a property has not gone through probate yet. So that's in the case of if there has been a death. Even on listings and on contracts, you always go to the tax records and see exactly who owned the property. And another thing that I wanted to mention, when you're filling out the listing agreement, make sure that you have the correct tax map number, because that is what the attorneys check the title by, is the tax map number, not necessarily the address. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So like I said, I'm sure you guys have gone over the listing agreement. If you have any questions, just ask me. And in some cases, you go out and look at the house first. So when you do your market value analysis, you'll know what the condition of the property is. Because we have RPR, but RPR has not gone out to the house. And we have people that go on Zillow, they go on Zoom, and they have all of these prices on there. And these people do not live in Florence. And, you know, a lot of times Zoom said that I can get 250 for my house, and you're saying I can only get 190. Well, maybe we need to let Zoom list it, because it's not going to sell for that. And you have to, you know, you don't have to be ugly, but you have to be stern. So when you go out there, be prepared. So you have your facts to back you up whenever you're giving them a price. Is there any questions? Okay, well, I must have did that real good then. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the property disclosure. That is one of the other items that you're going to take out to the property when you go to list it. Now, on this listing agreement, you go over this listing agreement with your clients. And guys, get familiar with the listing agreement, so when you go out there, you'll know what you're talking about. And you're going to run into some cases where the the seller is going to ask you to read every word and interpret every word for them. So just make yourself familiar with it so you can kind of give them a synopsis of what the listing agreement entails. And you go over the, when you go out there, you go over what the commission is going to be. We don't have a set commission. That's between the agent and the seller. And in most cases, if you're not a broker, it's between the broker, the agent, and the seller. So just keep that in mind. We do not have a set commission. We have to remember that. And on the property disclosure, do you have a copy of it? Give it to me.
I gave you the property disclosure.
Okay, so on the property disclosure, when you go out to take that property disclosure, you don't fill anything out. You hand that property disclosure to them and let them fill it out. Because if you write anything on there and we have a problem later, they're gonna say, well, I didn't write that on there, the agent did. And then that's gonna be the broker problem and the agent problem. And in some cases, the attorney problem. So you have to keep that in. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, and we do have one question from River.
Okay.
He has a question about multiple tax map numbers in one listing. Would you put all the tax map numbers in one listing agreement or make them a separate document?
Okay, it's just one property?
I believe so.
No, ma'am, I have a question. It's one property, one listing, but my question is, if there's multiple tax map numbers in one listing, would you write all the tax map numbers on that one listing agreement?
I guess I would, but I would try to find out from the courthouse which tax map number is correct.
Right. Okay. Well, what I'm asking is, I'm referring to a person who owns a property on one side of the road, and they also own a property on the other side of the road, but they're separate tax map numbers, but they want to list the properties together.
Oh yeah, you put all the tax map numbers on there because all of the properties got to be. You have to have everything in there so everything can be checked whenever
Right.
whenever the attorney checked the title. Yes. Yes.
I usually put one in there and then I put one down in remarks.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we good on the property disclosure. You don't write anything on there because you don't want to own that property, right? Okay, and the next thing that we do, we have the residential data sheet that's in zip forms and it's in MLS. I get the seller to fill that form out for me, because they may know something about the property that I don't know about. So I get them to fill out the back and the front.
Miss
And
Ann,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but one question that's come up is what happens if someone did not live in the house? What do they do for the property disclosure?
Well, I'm not an attorney, but my understanding is that if you never lived in the house, you still have to fill one out. So you need to talk to your broker about that, because I'm not your broker, but that's my understanding.
I think right now all they're saying is if it's new construction, they don't have to fill one out.
New construction, you don't have to fill one out, but rental property, even, you have to fill
Yeah.
one out.
Definitely with rental property. The inherited property, it could go either way. But I mean, if they, a lot of times, well, I didn't live in, I didn't know anything
Right.
about it. And they may have to just go into non-representation. But with
Yeah.
rental properties, their landlords, they know about that property. They know enough that they can answer questions. So a lot of times it used to be, well, it's a rental property, we don't fill it out. Well, with rental properties now, we definitely fill it out.
And maybe when you fill it out and you've never lived there, you have to do the no representation, because you've never lived there, so you can't say what's going on in the house and what's not going on in the house. But if somebody lives in the house, they can't put non-representation down there, because that's a red flag right there that they're hiding something. Anybody else? And I wanted to talk a little bit also about the year that the property was built. If it was built before 1978, then we have to get a lead-based paint disclosure sign. And that's going to need to go into the MLS documents as well. And I wanted to mention about earnest money, because we've had a couple of big problems with earnest money not getting where it's supposed to go. We had, in 2 cases at my office, someone was intercepting money that was going to a closing. We had one agent that his client almost lost $68,000 because I don't know where these people are that's sitting there trying to take money, but they are. So we were able to catch that before it happened. The other one, we were not able to catch the fact that they intercede with the bank and the wiring getting to the attorney's office, $6,000, and we have not been able to get that back yet. I just want you guys to remember, if your client on the buyer side or the seller side, if their money is being wired, make sure it's being wired to the right place. So just keep that in mind.
Miss Ann, we have a question from Brooke.
Okay.
What if they do not fill out the property disclosure? And also, do we include 1978 for lead disclosures?
You included if it was built before 1978, yes. And if they don't fill out the property disclosure, go to your broker and see what they have in their office policy. Because we have an office policy at my office. If something comes up that way, then the agent come discuss it with me, but you will need to discuss it with your broker. Because I want to stay in my lane, in my broker lane, not somebody else's. Anybody else? And I want to tell you guys too, decide if you want to be a selling agent or a listing agent. Back in the day, we always said that the people that list last. So decide if you want to work all the time or if you want to have someone else to work for you. And if you are a good lister, you can be on vacation and somebody can be selling your property for you. So decide how much you want to work. And real estate is a great business. And keep in mind, guys, you're going to make a lot of money. And then there are going to be times when you're not going to make a lot of money. So when you make all that cash, save some of it, please. And that's just the motherly advice for you guys today. Any more questions?
I think there's 4 chats, so there must be some questions in there.
So for the
Okay, they ask about the lead-based paint. Usually, they say if it's built prior to 1978, but usually I'll go ahead. If it's 78, I'll go ahead and
just, 78. I still do it.
I better safe than sorry. They'll say prior to, but I'll say, well, if it's 78, If it's 79, I don't worry about it. But if it's 78 and under, I'll go ahead and have them
Yeah.
fill it out.
Yeah.
I got there's 7 chats. I wonder, Lynn, do you see any questions or 7?
I
There's
think
7.
we've taken care of everyone that's asked.
Oh, okay. That's just kind of keeping a running total. Okay.
Does anyone have any other questions?
We have that. To Lynn. They're asking, we've got one from Larry to everyone. If there's a latent defect, do we disclose that?
Yes.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're privy to it, you know it, you got to.
Yeah, you got to disclose it.
Right.
And when you walk through that house, when you getting ready to list that baby, you looking at the ceilings, you looking at the floor, and you walking on the floor and something don't feel right, you bring that to their attention, because they might pretend they don't know about it, but you bring it to their attention. Anything that you know about a property, you have to disclose it.
And that even goes a step further when you have a listing and say it's under contract, they have inspections done, and then the thing falls through, or they don't get the repairs worked out. You know, I try to stress to my seller, look, you know, the next buyer is going to want these repairs done, and if they're not going to just disappear. Yeah, I know you don't want to, you know, normally a seller at first, they're going to have heartburn and they're not going to want to do it. But normally if you explain to them, look, you know, if it has to do with the structural integrity of the home or a safety issue, I try to tell them, look, the next buyer is going to want that. Let's at least, normally they go blow up and they don't want to do it. And I say, look, let's have a contractor go and look at all of these items, give us an itemized bill. It may, you know, it looks like a lot of stuff, but you know, it may not be as bad as you're thinking it is. And let's just go from there. Normally by that time, they've had time to really digest what the buyer is asking for. And by the time the contractor goes out there, they meet with the contractor explains to them why it needs to be done. And I try to tell that seller, you know, if it was you buying the house, wouldn't you want these things done? They normally will agree to it. They may not be thrilled about it, but I try to explain to them the next buyer will want to know this, and they're going to want the same things. And if it goes back on the market, guess what? We have to disclose that, because now this is stuff you're aware of and I'm aware of. And when it goes back on the market, those other agents are going to be asking, well, why did it go back on the market? Well, the roof is shot and the seller didn't want to replace the roof. Well, you know, that next buyer, of course, is going to want that. And I try to tell them, you know, the roof's a big deal. I mean, if the roof needs to be replaced and the buyer can't get insurance on the property because the roof is shot, if she can't get insurance, they're not going to be able to get a loan. That's a problem. That's going to be a problem for the next buyer as well. So just keep that in mind. I think when a seller feels like that, well, it's out there now, they may as well. And you'll have people to pull a fast one. I had one a couple of years ago. It fell apart because of repairs. She did not want to spend the money to do it. So she took it off the market. And I had given her a copy of the repair letter. She had a copy of the home inspection as far as the pages showing what needed to be done, and a quote from a contractor. She pulled a fast one. I'm going to take it off the market right now. My husband's terminally ill. This is more than I can take. I understood that. Fine. Okay. You go to put it back on the market, just give me a call. Well, a couple of months later, she listed with another agent. Yeah.
That will happen.
And well, I mean, I wasn't trying to blow the horn on her, but my buyer that wanted the house was still looking. They come to me and say, hey, Talia, that house is still on it's back on the market now. Did she make those necessary repairs? Because if she addressed everything, I want to make an offer. I want to proceed to buy that house. Okay. So what do I do but call the listing agent? Hey, this is Talia. You know, I'm not trying to start anything, but I do have the buyer that had a contract on this property. They're still out there on the market looking. They haven't found anything comparable to that house. They still really want that house, but you know, we've already paid for inspections for a house they didn't buy. You know, they had to come out of pocket, what, $500-600 on all these inspections. And, you know, the seller wasn't going to pay for it. She didn't want to make the repairs. She wasn't paying for the inspections. So buyer's out of this money. She said, I'm not going through that again. Has she made those repairs? So I go to now the new listing agent new listing agent didn't know what in the world I was talking about. No, she didn't say anything about that. She didn't say anything about any repairs. I don't know anything about it. So therefore she just went into it and act like there was no problems with the house, and you know, it fell apart. I don't know why it fell apart. Buyer just, you know, walked, and you know, I just took it off the market for a while. But she acted oblivion to the fact that there was problems with the house, and so therefore she was going to let another buyer go through all that again. And whether or not she'd have made the repairs, I don't know. I think eventually it did sell, but you will have sellers to pull that with you. Just be on notice. There are all kinds out there.
And also too, if the buyer is getting a loan, you have to have a clear termite letter in 99% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is a problem there and they know it's there and you in there and you can feel the floors and all that, I tell them, go ahead and get a termite letter done and let's just see what we're dealing with. Because I mean, it's no need to get down to the last minute and have a situation like what Talia is talking about. Because I mean, in most cases, everything can be fixed.
Right. Especially if it's an older home and it has a crawl space. And if the seller has limited funds, you know, a lot of them say, look, I'm going to sell it as is. I don't want to make any repairs. I think that as a listing agent, if you explain to them, look, you don't have to make any necessary repairs right now. You know, if they've got the equity to make that, to pay for those repairs, I explain to them, look, you know, let's get a home inspection done. When the buyer comes, when it goes under contract, that buyer's going to have their inspections done. We'll deal with it then. We can have, you know, quotes made, you know, come in, and then you can review them. And then when you authorize those repairs, you can pay for it at the closing table. You don't have to come out of pocket now. And when they understand that, a lot of times they're like, oh, okay, well, great. I didn't know that. I thought I had to fix everything now. They don't have the money for that. So a lot of times, you know, I try to tell them, you don't want to sell as is, because I can tell you right now, it could be a $2,000 fix. Someone's going to come in and offer you 10 or 15,000 less because they have to deal with it. And it's like a red flag going up in the air to that buyer. So I say, you're really going to narrow that pool of buyers down whenever it says sold as is. I know me as a buyer's agent, when I'm looking and I know my buyer is going to have a clear CL 100, they don't have any money to make repairs. When I see sold as is, I skip over it, because I mean, I know that they're not going to have funds to do it. Now, if it looks like a house that's just perfect for my buyer, I'll pick up the phone and I'll talk to the listing agent and say, hey, I see where it's sold as is, but I mean, do you think it's something, I mean, would the seller have equity in the home to pay for these repairs? Maybe we can, you know, maybe offer more for the house if the buyer is willing to make these repairs. And so that's, you know, that's something you can throw in there, because a lot of times agents don't know what they don't know. They don't know to explain that to that seller and say, hey, you don't have to make the repairs right now. As long as that seller understands that, 9 times out of 10, they're going to go along with you on that and go ahead. And I said, and you know what? Although you're not selling it as is, once those repairs come, you know, the repair request comes in and you have a quote done, it's all negotiable, you know. So just know, just because you're not saying right up front, I want to sell it as is, you may not want to address everything, but you know, there's some things. Sometimes the buyer could be very handy, him or herself, and say, look, you know, I can fix that. I can add that railing. I can, you know, do that, but I really want this electrical handled. I really want this crawl space deal. I want that taken care of, because they don't want to have to crawl underneath that house, and they don't want to mess with the electrical because they don't want to get electrocuted, you know? So just kind of some pitfalls.
I missed what she was saying about the equity part. What was she saying about?
A lot of times when a seller, if you're going to list your home, and a seller, a lot of times they'll say, look, I want to sell the house as is. I don't have any money to put into this house. They're looking at the fact they don't have money in their bank account right now that they want to mess with. But it may be that they have equity in the house, so that when that house goes under contract and a buyer has inspections done and they give you the repair request, that's when we can go have a contractor give a quote on what it's going to cost to make those repairs, and then the seller can pay for it at the closing table. You know, the only thing, you know, then they're on board with it. Then if they know they haven't got to come out of pocket right now, and they know they can wait until they've sold the house, basically, and at the closing table, when they get their money, the contractor gets his money, then they're normally on board with that. And I would say too that if it's going to be a costly repair, I mean, like replacing a roof or something that's going to cost a lot, you may want to hold off and have those repairs done once that buyer is, you talk to that lender and everything's on go.
Yep.
Because I've seen times where
Yes,
they
Lord.
jump out and go ahead and get those repairs, and then the thing fall through, and then they owe that money, and it's not going to the closing table, so then they don't have that equity to pay for it. So then that contractor is just out there hanging out there waiting to get waiting to get his repairs paid for, or get his money when the house goes under contract again. So I would just basically go ahead and have the quote done, and know that, look, and that's when you want to stay in close contact with that buyer's agent and that lender and say, hey, it's going to cost $10,000 for these repairs. My seller don't have it. He has it in equity. When you feel good about this loan, that we're going to proceed on to closing, and it's just a matter of us getting to the closing table, give me notification and I'll send that contractor out there. You want to do that to protect your seller.
Is that it, guys? Y'all ready to make your mark in real estate in Florence, South Carolina?
Whoop, whoop. I will tell you, you're going to have days where it's a great business. I got in 2002, so I've been in it. Next month will be 18 years, and I love it. There's nothing else I would rather do. I've made so many good friends in real estate. Two of my best friends right now are people I met through real estate. I sold them property, and they've become my best friends. But there's going to be days that you're going to think, what was I thinking? And you're going to hate life, because it can be very high stress. It can be. But my words of wisdom to you is, organization is your best friend. Take notes, make copies of emails, make yourself a checklist to keep yourself straight, knowing what you've done and what you haven't done, and keep up with your deadline dates. That's key. And as long as you do that,
and
you'll be
don't
good.
work all the time, because you will get burnt out. Okay.
Yes.
You need to take a break.
Right. Don't let real estate run you. You run real estate.
Yep.
If you've got a hair appointment or a pedicure appointment and someone wants to see a house, you know what? You just tell them, look, I have an appointment at that time. You have an appointment with yourself, and I'm sorry. And maybe that appointment's at 2 o'clock, and that hair appointment is going to take a couple of hours. Say, well, I have a 2 o'clock appointment. Perhaps could we meet at 5? They don't have to know you're going to go get your hair done. They don't need to know that you're getting a pedicure. You need that downtime.
Yep.
You really do, to gather yourself and just not think of anything. Just let just lay there and enjoy being pampered, because you need it. Definitely.
Yep. Because when I first got started in real estate and I started making some money, somebody could call me while we're at the dinner table on Thanksgiving Day.
Yep.
I'm in town and I want to see this house. I'll tell my family I'll be right back.
I've done that. I did too. Because in the beginning, you don't call nothing. You chase everything.
Right.
So you really do have to set your parameters. At night, when you're having dinner with your family, let it go to voicemail. If it's important, I promise you, they will leave you a message.
Yeah.
And call them after dinner, or just shoot them a text. Hey, I'm having dinner with my family. Can this wait until in the morning? Because a lot of times the things they're going to ask or talk about, you're not going to have any answers for them that night anyway. You're going to have to look into it in the morning. So
That's right.
you can say, hey, I'm having family time. Can I call you first thing in the morning? And a lot of times they'll be fine with that. Then they'll appreciate that, and they'll respect that. Now you do have some that think you're supposed to be
7 o'clock in the morning.
10 o'clock at night calling. You do have some, but you have to just set your boundaries with them.
Yep.
You got to let them know you run this show.
Yep. I am so excited for you guys. Real estate is wonderful.
It really is.
And if it's anything I can ever do for you, just let me know.
And me too. You just call me anytime if you have any questions about anything. I'll be more than happy to help, because the better agents we can make you, the better we're all going to be.
Yep.
Well, thank you, everyone. Ann and Talia, excellent job. Thank you so much, as usual. One other thing I would like to bring up to all of you, just as a reminder, please make sure you check your emails all the time, and you do not, and I mean do not, let your cell phone messages be to a point where they cannot leave one.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, so you
definitely.
tried to call me, huh?
When that happens, just send Ann a text. Hey girl, check you need to clean out your voicemail box so I can leave you a message.
Thank you all again. Good luck. And if you need anything, we're here. Have a great day.
Guys.
Thank you. That wasn't so bad.